The sound of a gunshot echoed through the moonlit plains of Nebraska Territory. 1859. As Jasmine Edwards clutched her threadbare shawl around her shoulders and ran blindly through the tall grass. Her lungs burned with each desperate breath, but she dared not stop, not with the devil himself at her heels. Behind her, the angry voices of men grew closer, her brother Samuel's cruel laugh cutting through the night like a knife. Brody Fletcher's hand froze on his whiskey glass at the commotion outside. The Broken Spoke Saloon in Council Bluffs wasn't known for its peaceful evenings, but the sudden eruption of shouting in the street had every patron turning toward the swinging doors. As the town's most successful cattle rancher, Brody had learned to mind his own business, but something in the desperate female cry that followed pulled him to his feet. $500. That's my final offer for her, a man's voice bellowed. She's worth twice that. Look at her, young, strong, and she can cook better than any woman west of the Mississippi. Another voice slurring and insistent. Brody stepped through the saloon doors into the cool spring night, his spurs jingling with each deliberate step. A crowd had gathered around two men standing beside a wagon. Between them, a young woman stood with her hands bound before her, her honey-brown hair falling in tangles around a face that might have been beautiful if not contorted in terror. "Samuel, please," the woman begged. "I'm your sister." "Shut your mouth." The taller man, Samuel, backhanded her across the face, sending her stumbling backward. "You stopped being my sister when Ma died. Now you're just another mouth to feed, and I aim to get something of value for my trouble." Something cold and hard settled in Brody's chest as he watched. He'd seen his share of depravity in his 32 years, but a man selling his own flesh and blood ranked among the worst. "What's going on here?" Brody's voice cut through the commotion. The crowd parted. Samuel Edwards, a wiry man with mean eyes and 3 days' worth of stubble, turned toward him. "Private business, Fletcher. Nothing that concerns you. Looks like you're selling a woman in the middle of town. That concerns everyone." The second man, a trail boss Brody vaguely recognized from previous cattle drives, spat a stream of tobacco juice into the dirt. "I'm buying fair and square. Girl's brother says she's his to sell, and I need a woman at my camp." Brody's eyes met the woman's. In that brief exchange, he saw a desperate plea that stirred something long dormant within him. "How much?" Brody asked. Samuel's eyebrows shot up. "700. She's worth every penny." "500, Brody countered, not breaking eye contact with the woman. "650. "550, and I don't tell Sheriff Mills about the cattle you rustled from the Henderson spread last month." Samuel's face paled. "That's a lie. Maybe, but Will Henderson thinks different and his word carries weight." After a tense silence, Samuel nodded. "550 it is." As Brody counted out the bills, he wondered what in God's name he was doing. He had no use for a woman at his ranch. The Fletcher spread was no place for someone like her, delicate despite her obvious fear, with hands that looked like they'd never known hard labor. "What's your name?" Brody asked as he untied her wrists. "Jasmine," she whispered, rubbing circulation back into her hands. "Jasmine Edwards. I'm Brody Fletcher. You'll be coming with me to my ranch outside of town." Fear flashed in her eyes. What will you expect of me?" Brody understood her meaning instantly. "Nothing you don't offer freely. I need help around the place, that's all. You'll have your own quarters, meals, and fair wages." The relief on her face was momentary, quickly replaced by suspicion. In her experience, Brody imagined, men didn't part with money without expecting something in return. "Why?" she asked simply. Brody looked at her brother, who was already mounting his horse, the money secured in his pocket. "Because no one deserves to be sold like cattle, especially by their own kin." As they rode away from town in Brody's wagon, Jasmine sat stiffly beside him, her eyes fixed on the darkening horizon. The silence stretched between them until they crested a hill, revealing the sprawling Fletcher ranch, a sturdy two-story main house, bunkhouse, barn, and corrals spread across the rolling landscape. "It's not much," Brody said, "but it's peaceful." "It's beautiful," Jasmine whispered, and Brody caught the glimmer of tears in her eyes. "You'll stay in the house. My foreman's wife, Martha, will help you get settled. There's a room upstairs that hasn't been used in years." "I can work," Jasmine said suddenly. "I can cook, clean, so I won't be a burden. We'll figure all that out tomorrow. For now, you need rest." Martha Rogers, a plump, gray-haired woman with kind eyes, met them at the door. One look at Jasmine's bruised face and disheveled appearance told her all she needed to know. "Poor lamb," she murmured, leading Jasmine inside. "Come along. A hot bath and some of my stew will set you right." Brody watched them go, wondering what madness had possessed him to bring a strange woman to his home. He had avoided entanglements with women since Catherine had left him at the altar 5 years ago, choosing a wealthy banker over a struggling rancher. The Fletcher spread was profitable now, but Brody's heart remained carefully guarded. Later that night, as he sat on the porch smoking his evening pipe, Martha joined him. "That girl's been through hell," she said without preamble. "Bruises all over, not just on her face, and thin as a rail. Her brother's been starving her, I reckon." Anger flared in Brody's chest. "She's safe now." Martha eyed him curiously. "What made you do it, Brody? Buy her like that?" Brody puffed on his pipe, considering. "I wish I knew. Something in her eyes, maybe, like a trapped animal that's still got fight left." "Well, whatever your reasons, you did a good thing. Though what you're going to do with her now is beyond me. Like I told her, she can help around the place until she decides what she wants." Martha nodded, but her expression remained doubtful. "Just be careful. A woman with nowhere to go can form attachments quickly." "And you've been alone too long." Brody scoffed. "I've got no interest in attachment, Martha. You know that." "Life has a way of changing our plans," she replied cryptically before bidding him good night. Upstairs, Jasmine sat on the edge of the bed, running her fingers over the clean quilt. For the first time in months, her stomach was full, her body clean, and she wore a borrowed nightgown that smelled of lavender. The room was simple but felt like a palace compared to the leaky shed Samuel had banished her to after their mother's death. She should have been relieved, and she was, but fear still gnawed at her. Men like Brody Fletcher didn't rescue women out of pure kindness. Eventually, he would want something in return, and when he discovered her secret, even this temporary sanctuary would be lost to her. Instinctively, her hand moved to her stomach. 2 months along now, the child within her still invisible to the world but growing steadily. The result of Samuel's gambling debts and his solution of offering his sister for a night to cover what he owed. Jasmine had fought, but the man had been too strong. A single tear slid down her cheek. How long could she hide her condition? And what would happen when Brody Fletcher discovered he'd paid for a woman carrying another man's child? Morning came with the crowing of a rooster and the smell of coffee and bacon wafting up the stairs. Jasmine dressed quickly in the simple cotton dress Martha had provided, pinning her hair into a modest bun before making her way downstairs. The kitchen was warm and bustling with activity. Martha stood at the stove, turning strips of bacon in a cast-iron skillet while a young boy of about 12 set the table. "Good morning, dear," Martha smiled. "This is my son, Thomas. My husband Jack's already out with the men. Sit down and have some breakfast." "Can I help?" Jasmine offered. "Not today. You eat and get your strength back. We can talk about chores tomorrow." As Jasmine sat, Brody entered, his tall frame filling the doorway. He'd already been out, judging by the dust on his boots and the sweat dampening his shirt. Their eyes met briefly, and Jasmine quickly looked away, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. "Morning," he said, nodding to both women before taking his seat. Breakfast passed with light conversation, mostly between Martha and Brody discussing ranch business. Jasmine remained quiet, observing the easy familiarity between them. It was clear that Martha had been with the Fletcher ranch for many years and held Brody's trust. After the meal, Brody cleared his throat. "Miss Edwards, if you're feeling up to it, I thought I might show you around the property today. Give you an idea of where everything is." "I'd like that," Jasmine replied softly. The Fletcher ranch sprawled across 5,000 acres of Nebraska Territory's finest grassland. As they rode in Brody's wagon, he pointed out the boundaries, the creek that provided water year-round, the grazing pastures where hundreds of cattle roamed, and the vegetable garden Martha tended behind the main house. "How long have you been here?" Jasmine asked as they stopped to rest the horses. "Born and raised," Brody replied, his eyes scanning the horizon with obvious pride. "My father built this place with his bare hands, started with nothing but 100 acres and 10 head of cattle. When he died 7 years ago, I took over. It's impressive." Brody's mouth quirked into a half-smile. "It's hard work, but it's honest, better than some alternatives. Like selling your sister." The words escaped before Jasmine could stop them. Brody's expression softened. "I didn't mean to bring up painful memories. It's all right. I've lived with Samuel's cruelty since our mother died 3 years ago. Yesterday wasn't surprising, just final." She swallowed hard. "I should thank you. Most men would have." "Don't," Brody cut her off. "Don't thank me for treating you like a human being." They continued their tour in comfortable silence. By the time they returned to the main house, the sun was high overhead, and Jasmine felt more at ease than she had in years. Brody Fletcher might be a mystery, but he seemed to be a decent man, a rarity in her experience. Over the following weeks, Jasmine settled into life at the Fletcher ranch. She helped Martha with cooking and cleaning, mended the Cowboy's clothes, and even learned to gather eggs from the ornery hens in the coop. The hard work kept her mind occupied during the day, though her nights were often spent staring at the ceiling, wondering what would become of her and her child. The morning sickness started in her 6th week at the ranch. She'd managed to hide it at first, slipping outside before dawn to empty her stomach behind the barn. But Martha's keen eyes missed little, and one morning she found Jasmine retching into the garden. "How far along are you, child?" Martha asked gently, holding back Jasmine's hair. Panic seized Jasmine's heart. "Please don't tell Mr. Fletcher, he'll send me away." Martha's expression grew sad. "Your brother?" "No," Jasmine whispered. "A man who won a card game against him. Samuel offered me as payment." Martha's face hardened with anger, but her hand remained gentle on Jasmine's back. "Brody won't send you away. He's a better man than that. He didn't pay for a woman with a bastard child. He paid for you, not what you can give him." Martha helped Jasmine to her feet. "But it's your secret to tell, and I won't betray your confidence. Just know you can't hide it forever." Jasmine nodded, grateful for Martha's understanding but unconvinced of Brody's potential reaction. She'd seen how men treated ruined women, and while Brody had shown her nothing but respect, she feared that respect would vanish once he knew the truth. Unbeknownst to Jasmine, Brody had noticed the changes in her. The pallor of her skin some mornings, the way she sometimes pressed her hand against her stomach when she thought no one was looking. He wasn't ignorant of women's conditions, having grown up with 3 sisters. But he said nothing, allowing her the privacy of her secret until she chose to share it. What surprised him more was how often he found himself thinking about her. The way her face had transformed from fearful to peaceful over the weeks, how she hummed softly while hanging laundry. The gentle manner she had with Thomas, teaching the boy to read better in the evenings by the fire. One evening, as Brody sat on the porch watching the sunset, Jasmine joined him, carefully settling into the rocking chair beside his. "Beautiful," she said, gazing at the sky painted in shades of orange and purple. "It is," Brody agreed, though his eyes had drifted to her profile. "Mr. Fletcher, Brody," he corrected. "After all this time, I think we can dispense with formalities." She smiled slightly. "Brody, then, I wanted to thank you for your kindness these past weeks. You've asked nothing of me, expected nothing. That was our agreement." "Yes, but most men wouldn't honor such an agreement." She hesitated. "I want to be honest with you." Brody felt his chest tighten. "You don't owe me any explanations, Jasmine. I think I do." She took a deep breath. "I'm with child." Though he'd suspected, hearing her confirm it stirred unexpected emotions in Brody. Anger at the man who had taken advantage of her, protectiveness toward both Jasmine and her unborn child, and strangely, a sense of determination. "Your brother's doing?" he asked quietly. "His gambling." "I was payment for a debt." Brody's hands clenched into fists. "I should have killed him that night. Then you'd hang, and where would your ranch be?" Jasmine's voice was gentle but firm. "I understand if you want me to leave." "A woman in my condition—" "You're not going anywhere," Brody interrupted. "Not unless you want to. This changes nothing about our arrangement." Jasmine stared at him, clearly astonished. "But the child? We'll need a safe place to be born and raised." Brody's voice softened. "Children are a blessing, Jasmine, no matter the circumstances of their creation." Tears filled her eyes. "I don't understand you, Brody Fletcher. Most men would." "I'm not most men." He stood, suddenly uncomfortable with the intensity of the moment. "It's getting late. We should both get some rest." As Jasmine climbed the stairs to her room that night, confusion swirled within her. Brody's reaction had been so different from what she'd expected. There had been no disgust, no judgment in his eyes, only compassion and something else she couldn't quite name. For the first time since discovering her pregnancy, Jasmine allowed herself to imagine a future where she and her child might know safety and even happiness. It was a dangerous hope, but one her heart clung to as she drifted into the most peaceful sleep she'd had in months. Summer arrived, bringing scorching days and the back-breaking work of the cattle drive. Brody and most of his men would be gone for weeks, taking 300 head of cattle to market in Kansas City. The night before their departure, the ranch hosted a traditional send-off dinner. The long table outside the main house groaned under the weight of food prepared by Martha and Jasmine. Cowboys laughed and told stories as the sun set, their faces illuminated by lantern light. Jasmine, now showing slightly in her 4th month, moved among them serving seconds of Martha's famous apple pie. Brody watched her from across the fire. There was a new confidence in her movements, a quiet dignity that hadn't been there when he'd first brought her to the ranch. She smiled more often now, and the sound of her laughter no longer startled her as if she'd committed some offense. Later, as the celebration wound down and the men drifted toward the bunkhouse to get what sleep they could before their dawn departure, Brody found Jasmine alone by the corral, gazing up at the star-filled sky. "You should rest," he said, coming to stand beside her. "It's late." "I wanted to wish you a safe journey," she replied. "I'll be praying for you all. We'll be back before the first frost. Jack and Thomas will stay behind to help you and Martha. We'll manage just fine." She turned to face him. "Brody, there's something I've been meaning to ask you." "What's that? Why did you really buy me that night?" "The truth." Brody leaned against the fence post, considering his answer. "I told myself it was because no person should be treated as property. That's true enough, but—" "But," she prompted when he fell silent. "But there was something else, something I can't explain." He shook his head. When I saw you standing there, it was like a voice inside me said her. She's important, foolish, I know. Not foolish, Jasmine said softly. Providential, perhaps. Their eyes met in the moonlight, and for a moment, something unspoken passed between them. Then Brody straightened, suddenly aware of how close they stood. I should get some sleep. Dawn comes early. Of course. She hesitated, then reached out and touched his arm lightly. Be careful, Brody. He covered her hand with his own briefly. I will. Take care of yourself and the little one. As Brody walked away, he found himself oddly reluctant to leave. In the months since bringing Jasmine to the ranch, something had shifted between them, a tentative trust building into. What? He wasn't sure, and with weeks on the trail ahead, he'd have plenty of time to ponder the question. The cattle drive proved more challenging than anticipated. Unseasonably heavy rains turned creek crossings into dangerous affairs, and a lightning strike spooked the herd into a near stampede one terrifying night. By the time they reached Kansas City, the men were exhausted but triumphant. The cattle fetched an excellent price, ensuring the ranch's financial security for another year. Throughout the journey, Brody found his thoughts constantly returning to Council Bluffs, to his ranch, and the woman waiting there. He'd never been homesick during a drive before, but this time, each mile of the return journey couldn't pass quickly enough. Back at the ranch, Jasmine's pregnancy progressed. Her belly grew rounder, and life stirred within her, kicks and movements that both terrified and amazed her. Martha became her steadfast companion, teaching her about childbirth and motherhood with practical wisdom and gentle encouragement. Have you thought of names? Martha asked one evening as they sat mending shirts on the porch. Benjamin for a boy, after my father, Jasmine replied. For a girl? I'm not certain. You could name her after your mother. Jasmine shook her head. Elizabeth is too formal. My mother was Lizzie to everyone who knew her. A beautiful name. Yes, Jasmine agreed, her needle moving rhythmically through the fabric. Martha, may I ask you something personal? Of course, dear. How did you know you loved Jack? Martha's hand stilled. My, that is personal, she smiled. I knew because I couldn't imagine my life without him in it. Even his most annoying habits, and Lord knows, after 30 years of marriage, I've cataloged plenty, seem precious to me because they're his. I've never seen love like that, Jasmine admitted. My parents argued constantly. When my father died, my mother seemed more relieved than bereaved. Not all marriages are blessed with love, Martha said sadly, but when they are, it's the closest thing to heaven on earth. Jasmine's eyes dropped to her mending. Do you think a man could ever love me knowing about the baby? The right man would love you because of the baby, not despite it. Martha's eyes were kind. A child is never a burden to a good man, no matter how they came to be. Brody said something similar, Jasmine murmured. Martha's smile turned knowing. Did he now? Interesting. What's interesting? That you're thinking about what Brody said regarding your child, and that you're asking about love while he's away. Jasmine blushed. It's not like that. He's my employer. He's a good man who looks at you when he thinks no one's noticing. He doesn't, Jasmine protested, but her heart quickened at the thought. If you say so, dear. Martha returned to her mending, humming softly. That night, Jasmine lay awake, her hand resting on her rounded belly as her child moved within her. Had Brody truly looked at her the way Martha suggested? And more troubling, why did the thought bring her such secret joy? She'd vowed never to give herself to a man after what had happened with Samuel's creditor. The violation had left scars deeper than physical ones, a distrust that she thought would never heal. Yet when she thought of Brody, his quiet strength, his unexpected gentleness, the respect with which he treated everyone at the ranch, she felt something dangerous stirring within her heart. It's foolishness, she whispered to her unborn child. He saved us, that's all. Gratitude is not love. But as sleep finally claimed her, Jasmine's dreams were filled with Brody Fletcher's smile and the impossible fantasy of a family that might never be. 6 weeks after the cattle drive's departure, Martha spotted a cloud of dust on the horizon. She called Jasmine, who was hanging laundry in the yard, and pointed. "They're coming home," Martha said, smiling at the way Jasmine's face lit up before she could hide her reaction. The women hurried to prepare a welcome feast. By the time the riders appeared in the yard, the smell of roasting meat and fresh bread filled the air. Thomas ran out whooping with excitement as his father dismounted, while Martha followed at a more dignified pace, though her smile was just as bright. Jasmine stood in the doorway, suddenly hesitant. Her pregnancy was obvious now, her dress altered to accommodate her changing body. How would Brody react, seeing her this way? As if sensing her thoughts, he looked up from unsaddling his horse and saw her. For a moment he simply stared, and Jasmine's heart sank. Then he handed the reins to one of his men and strode toward her, his expression unreadable. "Jasmine," he said, stopping at the bottom of the porch steps, "you're looking well." "Welcome home," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "We've prepared dinner." "I can smell it," he smiled, and the tension eased from her shoulders. "I hope you saved some of Martha's peach preserves. I've been dreaming about them for 6 weeks. 3 jars, Jasmine confirmed, returning his smile. "We made them last month when the peaches were perfect." Brody raised an eyebrow. "Jasmine's become quite the cook," Martha called from where she stood embracing Jack. "She's mastered my preserves recipe better than I have." "Is that so?" Brody's eyes remained on Jasmine, warm with something that made her heart flutter. "Then I have even more to look forward to." Dinner that night was a joyous affair. The cowboys shared tales of the trail, some embellished for dramatic effect, while Martha and Jasmine countered with news from the ranch. Through it all, Jasmine felt Brody's eyes returning to her, and each time their gazes met, a current of awareness passed between them. After the men had returned to the bunkhouse, and Martha and Jack had retired with Thomas, Jasmine found herself alone with Brody on the porch, much as they had been the night before his departure. The summer air was warm, filled with the singing of crickets and the distant lowing of cattle. "You've changed," Brody observed quietly. Jasmine laughed softly, placing a hand on her rounded belly. "Rather obviously, I think. Not just that," he hesitated. "There's a peace about you now. You seem settled." "I am," she admitted. "For the first time in years I feel safe." "I'm glad." A comfortable silence fell between them. Finally, Brody spoke again. "I brought something for you from Kansas City." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small package wrapped in brown paper. "You didn't need to, I wanted to." He handed it to her. Jasmine carefully unwrapped the paper to reveal a small silver locket on a delicate chain. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Open it." Inside was a tiny scrap of paper with a Bible verse written in neat script. "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." Tears filled Jasmine's eyes. Jeremiah 29:11, my mother's favorite verse. She used to recite it when times were hard. Brody's voice was soft with memory. "Thought you and the little one might need the reminder sometimes." "Thank you," Jasmine said, clutching the locket to her chest. "I'll treasure it always." Brody helped her fasten it around her neck, his fingers brushing against her skin. The touch sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the evening breeze. "Jasmine," he began, his voice suddenly serious, "I've been thinking during the drive. About you, about the baby." Her heart began to pound. "Oh, I want you to stay, not as an employee, but..." He ran a hand through his hair, uncharacteristically flustered. "This is coming out all wrong. What I mean to say is I care for you. More than I should, perhaps, given our circumstances. But I can't deny what I feel, and I hoped you might feel something too." Jasmine stared at him, scarcely believing what she was hearing. "Brody, I'm carrying another man's child. A child who deserves a father who'll love them," he countered. "And a mother who deserves a husband who'll cherish her. Are you?" Jasmine couldn't finish the question, not proposing, not yet. Brody took her hand gently. "That wouldn't be right, not until you're sure of your own feelings, but I'm asking permission to court you properly. To show you what life could be like if you chose to build it with me." Joy and fear warred within Jasmine's heart. What if I can never, after what happened? Understanding dawned in Brody's eyes. "I would never rush you or demand anything you weren't ready to give. We'd take things slowly at your pace. And if that pace is very slow indeed, then I'll be the most patient man in Nebraska Territory." He squeezed her hand. "All I ask is a chance, Jasmine. The rest will come in its own time." Tears slipped down her cheeks as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'd like that very much." Brody's smile was brilliant in the moonlight. Slowly giving her time to pull away, he leaned forward and pressed the gentlest of kisses to her forehead. "Thank you," he murmured against her skin. As Jasmine made her way upstairs that night, her fingers constantly returned to the locket at her throat. Hope blossomed within her, tentative and fragile, but alive. Perhaps Martha had been right. Perhaps the right man could love her not despite her circumstances, but with full acceptance of them. For the first time, Jasmine allowed herself to imagine a future with Brody Fletcher raising her child together, building a life on this beautiful land. It was a dream she'd never dared to dream before, but now that it had taken root in her heart, she found herself nurturing it like the precious gift it was. Brody's courtship began with small gestures: wildflowers left on the breakfast table, a rocking chair that appeared on the porch one day, for when the baby comes, evening walks where they talked about everything and nothing. He never pushed for more intimacy than Jasmine was ready to give, content with the occasional touch of her hand or the shy smiles she bestowed when he said something that pleased her. As summer faded into autumn, Jasmine's pregnancy advanced. She grew heavy with child, her movements slowing as her due date approached. Brody hovered nearby whenever possible, his concern both touching and occasionally amusing to Martha, who had seen many babies born during her years on the frontier. "If you don't stop pacing every time she winces, you'll wear a trench to China before this baby arrives," Martha scolded him one evening as Jasmine shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "I'm fine, Brody," Jasmine assured him. "Just a little backache." But as the evening progressed, the backache intensified into regular pains that came in waves. By midnight, there was no denying that Jasmine's labor had begun. Martha sent Jack to fetch the midwife from town, while Thomas was dispatched to the bunkhouse to inform the men they'd need to manage without Brody the next day. Brody paced outside Jasmine's room as her labor progressed, flinching at each cry that escaped through the closed door. Dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, but still the ordeal continued. The midwife arrived, shooing Brody downstairs with assurances that everything was proceeding normally. "First babies take their time," she told him firmly. "Now go make yourself useful elsewhere." Brody tried to occupy himself with ranch chores, but his mind remained fixed on the upstairs bedroom where Jasmine fought to bring new life into the world. By mid-afternoon, even the stoic Jack was eyeing him with concern. "Son, you need to calm yourself," the foreman advised. "Women have been doing this since Eve. What if something goes wrong?" Brody asked, voicing the fear that had haunted him all day. "Then you'll handle it," Jack said simply, "but fretting won't help her now." As the sun began to set, a different cry echoed through the house, the unmistakable wail of a newborn. Brody froze in the middle of the yard, his heart pounding. Thomas came racing from the house. "It's a boy," he shouted. A big, healthy boy. Relief flooded through Brody, making his knees weak. A boy. Jasmine had a son. Martha appeared at the door, her apron stained but her face radiant. "She's asking for you," she called to Brody. He took the stairs 2 at a time, pausing only briefly outside Jasmine's door to compose himself. When he entered, the scene before him stole his breath. Jasmine reclined against the pillows, her face exhausted but glowing with an inner light he'd never seen before. In her arms, wrapped in a soft blanket, lay a tiny bundle. "Brody," she smiled, her voice hoarse from hours of labor. "Come meet Benjamin." He approached the bed cautiously, as if afraid his presence might somehow disturb the perfect tableau. The midwife, gathering her supplies in the corner, gave him an approving nod. "Would you like to hold him?" Jasmine asked. I've never held a baby," Brody admitted. "There's nothing to it," the midwife said cheerfully. "Just support his head and don't drop him." With trembling hands, Brody accepted the swaddled infant. Benjamin Fletcher Edwards weighed no more than a newborn calf, but the responsibility Brody felt holding him was immeasurably greater. The baby's eyes, blue like most newborns, opened briefly to study Brody's face before closing again in sleep. "He's perfect," Brody whispered, awed by the tiny fingers, the button nose, the soft wisps of dark hair. "He is," Jasmine agreed, watching them with tender eyes. As Brody gazed down at the sleeping infant, a strange sensation swept through him, a fierce protectiveness, an immediate and overwhelming love that caught him completely by surprise. This child, born of violence and carried in hardship, was innocent of his beginnings. He deserved every chance, every advantage Brody could provide. In that moment, looking at Benjamin's peaceful face, Brody realized what Jasmine had given him. Not just her trust and growing affection, but a chance at fatherhood he'd thought might never come. The words Martha had spoken months ago echoed in his mind. Life has a way of changing our plans. Indeed it did. And as Brody carefully returned Benjamin to Jasmine's arms, he silently thanked God for the changes this woman and her child had brought to his life. The following weeks passed in a blur of midnight feedings, diaper changes, and the constant adjustments required by a new baby in the house. Jasmine recovered her strength quickly, determined to resume her duties, despite Martha's insistence that she rest. Brody found himself drawn to the nursery at odd hours, just to watch Benjamin sleep or to soothe him when he fussed. Though he was careful not to overstep, Benjamin was Jasmine's son. After all, he couldn't help the way his heart expanded each time the baby gripped his finger or settled contentedly against his chest. One crisp November afternoon, Brody found Jasmine in the garden, gathering the last of the season's herbs before the first frost. Benjamin slept nearby in a basket, bundled against the autumn chill. "You shouldn't be working so soon," Brody said, joining her. "Fresh air does us both good," she replied, straightening with a handful of rosemary. "Besides, I was going mad sitting in that room all day," Brody chuckled. "Stubborn woman. You're just noticing." Their easy banter was a development of the past few weeks, as Jasmine grew more confident in her place at the ranch and in Brody's affections. She was still reserved at times, still carried shadows from her past, but each day brought new moments of joy and healing. "I have something to discuss with you," Brody said, taking the herbs from her hands and setting them in her basket. "A business matter of sorts." Jasmine raised an eyebrow. "That sounds ominous." "Not at all." He guided her to the small bench at the edge of the garden. I've been thinking about Benjamin's future. A wariness entered Jasmine's eyes. What about it? I want him to have my name. When Jasmine looked startled, Brody hurried on. Not just my name, everything. This land, the cattle, all of it. I want him to be my legal heir. But why? You're not his father. I could be, Brody said softly. In every way that matters. Jasmine's eyes filled with tears. Brody, let me finish, please. He took her hands in his. These past months with you and Benjamin have shown me what I was missing in my life. Not just companionship, but purpose beyond the ranch. I want to watch him grow, teach him to ride, see him become a man any father would be proud of. Any child would be blessed to have you as a father, Jasmine whispered. Then let me be his father, Jasmine. Brody reached into his pocket and withdrew a simple gold band. Be my wife. Let me be a husband to you and a father to your son. Jasmine stared at the ring, her heart racing. This isn't about Benjamin, is it? No, Brody admitted. It's about us, all three of us. I love you, Jasmine Edwards. I think I've loved you since that night in town, though I was too stubborn to recognize it then. And now, she asked, her voice barely audible, now I know what love is. It's wanting your happiness above my own. It's seeing you with our son, yes, our son, and feeling complete for the first time in my life. A tear slipped down Jasmine's cheek. I'm afraid, she confessed. Of what? Of trusting this happiness, of believing it can last. Brody cupped her face gently. Some things are worth the risk of pain. This us is one of them. Jasmine searched his eyes, finding nothing but sincerity and love reflected there. Slowly she nodded. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you, Brody Fletcher. His smile was brilliant as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It was slightly too large, but neither of them cared as Brody leaned forward to place a gentle kiss on her lips there first, and a promise of many more to come. Benjamin chose that moment to wake, his cry breaking the spell around them. Jasmine laughed softly as she rose to tend to him. Already asserting himself, Brody said, following her to the basket. Jasmine lifted Benjamin, cradling him against her shoulder. He'll need a strong will to be a Fletcher. Indeed he will. Brody stroked the baby's dark hair. Benjamin Fletcher, it has a good sound to it. It does, Jasmine agreed, leaning into Brody's side as he wrapped an arm around them both. Standing there in the garden, with the woman he loved and the child who had captured his heart, Brody felt a contentment he'd never known. The path that had led them here had been marked by pain and uncertainty, but standing at its end, he wouldn't have changed a single step. Jasmine and Brody were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the ranch. Pastor Williams from Council Bluffs officiated, while Martha, Jack Thomas, and the ranch hands served as witnesses. Jasmine wore a cream-colored dress Martha had helped her sew, with Benjamin's locket nestled at her throat. Brody, in his Sunday best, couldn't take his eyes off his bride as she walked toward him, their son cradled in her arms. The vows they exchanged were traditional, but the meaning behind them ran deeper than words could express. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, Brody kissed Jasmine with a tenderness that brought tears to even Jack's stoic eyes. The celebration afterward was boisterous, with food and music lasting well into the evening. As the newlyweds shared their first dance, Benjamin safely asleep upstairs, Jasmine marveled at how dramatically her life had changed in less than a year. "What are you thinking?" Brody asked, noticing her pensive expression. That if someone had told me last spring that I would end this year as Jasmine Fletcher, married to the kindest man in Nebraska Territory and mother to the most beautiful baby boy, I would have thought them mad. Brody smiled. Life has a way of surprising us, sometimes wonderfully so. She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. I love you, Brody Fletcher. And I love you, Mrs. Fletcher. Later that night, As they prepared to retire to their now shared bedroom, Jasmine felt a flutter of nervousness. Brody had been patient during their courtship, never pressuring her for physical intimacy. But marriage brought expectations, and despite her love for him, the memory of her violation still haunted her. Brody sensed her apprehension as they stood awkwardly in their room. "We don't have to do anything you're not ready for," he said gently. "I meant what I said about taking things at your pace." Relief flooded through Jasmine. "Thank you," she whispered. I just need time." "We have all the time in the world," he kissed her forehead. "For tonight, I'd be content just to hold you." And so their married life began not with passion, but with tenderness. Each night, Brody held Jasmine as she fell asleep, gradually earning her trust through his patience and restraint. Slowly, tentatively, Jasmine allowed herself to explore this new territory of loving touch, of pleasure freely given and received. When they finally came together as husband and wife, some weeks after their wedding, it was a revelation for both of them, healing for Jasmine and profound connection for Brody. What had been taken from her by force was now freely given in love, transforming an act of violence into one of redemption. Winter settled over the Nebraska Territory, bringing snow that blanketed the ranch in pristine white. The cattle huddled in sheltered areas, while inside the main house, the Fletcher family created new traditions for their first Christmas together. Martha taught Jasmine to make gingerbread, filling the house with spicy sweetness. Brody and Jack cut a pine tree from the North Ridge and set it up in the parlor, where Thomas and Jasmine decorated it with strings of dried berries, paper stars, and precious glass ornaments that had belonged to Brody's mother. On Christmas Eve, as they gathered around the fireplace, Brody presented Jasmine with a leather-bound journal. "For Benjamin's story," he explained, "so he'll know where he came from and how much he was wanted." Jasmine ran her fingers over the soft leather. "Our story," she corrected. "From the moment you saw me in Council Bluffs." "From the moment I found my salvation," Brody said softly, watching Benjamin sleep in his cradle nearby. "Your salvation?" Jasmine asked, puzzled. Brody took her hand. "Before you, I was just existing, building the ranch, making money, but for what? I had no purpose beyond the next season, the next drive. Benjamin and you gave me something to live for beyond myself." "We saved each other then," Jasmine murmured. As the new year dawned, bringing with it Benjamin's first smile and later his first attempts at crawling, Brody and Jasmine settled into the rhythm of family life. The ranch prospered under Brody's careful management, allowing them to hire more hands and expand their operation. Spring brought new calves and the planting of an expanded garden. Summer saw Benjamin taking his first tentative steps across the porch, falling into Brody's waiting arms with peals of delighted laughter. By autumn, when Benjamin celebrated his first birthday with a cake Martha baked especially for the occasion, another celebration was in the planning. "Are you certain?" Brody asked, his face alight with hope when Jasmine shared her suspicion that she was again with child. "As certain as I can be without the doctor's confirmation," she replied, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. "Martha suspects as well." Brody whooped with joy, lifting Jasmine off her feet and spinning her around. "Another baby. Benjamin will have a brother or sister." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, with Jasmine blooming under Brody's attentive care. Benjamin, now a sturdy toddler with his mother's honey-brown hair and a temperament that matched Brody's determined nature, patted his mother's growing belly with gentle hands. "Baby," he would say solemnly, one of his first words. "That's right," Jasmine would reply. "Your baby brother or sister." As winter approached once more, Jasmine's time drew near. Unlike the fear that had marked Benjamin's birth, this time she faced the prospect with confidence. secure in Brody's love and the knowledge that she was bringing a child into a home filled with joy. Sarah Elizabeth Fletcher was born on a snowy December night, arriving with considerably less fuss than her brother had. She had Brody's blue eyes and a dusting of dark hair that promised to be as thick as his. When Brody held his daughter for the first time, the tears he'd managed to contain at Benjamin's birth flowed freely. "She's beautiful," he whispered, counting her tiny fingers with wonder. "Just like her mother." Jasmine, exhausted but radiant, watched her husband cradle their daughter. "She's a Fletcher through and through. Look at that determined little chin." "Heaven help us," Brody laughed. "Between her and Benjamin, we'll have our hands full." As Sarah was placed in her brother's arms with Brody's careful supervision, Benjamin studied the tiny face with serious concentration before declaring, "My baby." "That's right," Brody agreed, ruffling his son's hair. "Your sister. And you'll always protect her, won't you?" Benjamin nodded solemnly. A promise made in the innocent certainty of childhood, but one that would define their relationship in the years to come. Life at the Fletcher Ranch settled into the beautiful chaos that comes with young children. Benjamin grew into an energetic boy who shadowed Brody around the ranch, soaking up knowledge of cattle and horses with an enthusiasm that made the ranch hands smile. Sarah, with her mother's gentle spirit and her father's determination, became the darling of everyone at the ranch, especially Thomas, who taught her to read when she was barely 4. 5 years after Sarah's birth, Jasmine presented Brody with another son, Robert Jack Fletcher, named for both Brody's father and the foreman who had become like family to them all. The Fletcher children filled the once quiet ranch house with laughter, arguments, music. When Sarah began piano lessons with a teacher from Council Bluffs, and the endless energy of youth. Through it all, Brody and Jasmine's love deepened. The tentative affection of their early days blossomed into a partnership built on trust, respect, and unwavering commitment. They faced the challenges of ranch life together: drought years, harsh winters, the occasional rustler drawing strength from each other when times were difficult. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Brody surprised Jasmine with a trip to Omaha, leaving the children in Martha and Jack's capable hands for 3 days. They stayed in a fine hotel, attended the theater, and walked arm in arm through streets so different from the dusty roads of Council Bluffs. On their final night, as they stood on the hotel balcony watching the city lights, Brody wrapped his arms around Jasmine from behind. "Any regrets?" he asked softly. She leaned back against his chest. "About what, any of it? Being sold by your brother, coming to the ranch, marrying a stubborn rancher." Jasmine turned in his arms to face him. At 34, she was more beautiful to him than she had been at 22, her face now reflecting the wisdom and confidence that come with years of being loved well. "Not one," she replied honestly. "Every step, even the painful ones, led me to you, to our children, to a life I never dared dream of. I thank God every day for the voice that told me to intervene that night," Brody said, stroking her cheek. "For the madness that made me pay $550 for a woman I didn't know. Best investment you ever made," Jasmine teased, without question. His expression grew serious. "You and Benjamin truly were my salvation, Jasmine. I was a wealthy man before you, but I was poor in all the ways that matter. And now I'm the richest man in Nebraska Territory." He kissed her softly, "and not because of cattle or land." When they returned to the ranch, their children raced to meet them. Benjamin, now 12 and tall for his age, Sarah 7, and as graceful as her mother, little Bobby 5 and full of mischief. As Brody lifted Bobby high in the air, making the boy shriek with laughter, Jasmine watched her family with a heart full of gratitude. The journey from being property to be sold to becoming the beloved heart of the Fletcher family had been long and sometimes painful. The scars of her past would always be part of her story, but they no longer defined her. What defined her now was the love she gave and received, the children she raised, the life she and Brody had built together. As the sun set over the ranch that had become her home, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Jasmine thought of the locket she still wore, the one Brody had given her before Benjamin's birth. The verse inside had proven true beyond her wildest hopes. God's plan for her had indeed been one of prosperity and hope, of a future brighter than she could have imagined on that terrifying night in Council Bluffs. "Mama, come see what Thomas taught me," Sarah called, breaking into her thoughts. "Coming, sweetheart," Jasmine replied. Moving toward her daughter with a smile behind her, Brody watched his wife walk away, still marveling at the twist of fate that had brought her into his life. A woman sold by her brother had become his partner, his love, the mother of his children. And the child she had carried, a boy born of violence but raised in love, had grown into a son any father would be proud to claim. As Benjamin approached him, already showing signs of the man he would become, Brody placed an arm around his shoulders. "Everything all right, Pa?" Benjamin asked. "Everything's perfect, son," Brody replied. "Absolutely perfect." And in that moment, standing on the land his father had built from nothing, surrounded by the family he and Jasmine had created together, Brody Fletcher knew it was the simple truth. From unlikely beginnings had come the greatest blessing a man could ask for, a love that had saved them both.